Who's in Greensboro at the Coliseum. I'm Joe Ovies back in Raleigh. And look, North Carolina's had some wins that I don't want to call them easy. They took care of business. Other teams have made it easy for them, right? The Notre
Yeah,
Dame win was something that I would classify as a game in which the Irish made it easy for them. I mean, how else can you explain what was it, a 45 to 2 run and the way that second half played out? Duke was essentially out of that game last past Saturday within the first 5 minutes. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, after a 12-day layoff through contact tracing, which allowed them to practice, they were ready to go tonight. And that first half was physical, it was fun. My curiosity was, how is Virginia Tech going to handle the course of the game, and how is North Carolina going to adjust? Carolina adjusted, and they wore the Hokies down with some big boy play from their bigs. I was impressive by the Tar Heels tonight.
yeah, I was very impressed with them throughout because Virginia Tech is a tough team, a really good defensive team, and I think Carolina was kind of taken aback in the beginning. It's the first
Mm-hmm.
time they played Virginia Tech. I think they were not happy, some of them, with like the way some of the officiating was going. They were a little bit bothered by it. They were letting it get to them. And then at a certain point, Armando Bacot, among others, but everybody really, they just kind of were like, no, all right, is this how it's going to be? Like, let's go, you
Yeah,
know? And then you started to see the Hokies get bothered by some of the same stuff. And, UNC just was like, we can play a physical game. We don't have to make everything pretty. Like, okay. And I was very impressed by that because that's just, they haven't had to win a game that way, really. And they haven't had, the thing is, too, they have not had to win a game that way in which it wasn't, trying to think of how to put this, their fault, right?
yeah.
Florida State, they had to do it this way, but they also did it to themselves with how poorly they played in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this was like Virginia Tech, like you said, they came out, they tried to set the tone, they played very well. It
They
wasn't,
did.
it wasn't like North Carolina was turning it over 20 times. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they were in a little bit of a hole and had to respond, but it wasn't because they were making typical UNC mistakes. It was because Virginia Tech was good.
Yeah, look, this is a good Hokie squad, and I'd be curious to see how they would look going into the ACC tournament if their season wasn't like a myth, so to speak. Because I mean,
Yeah,
they've just had a really weird season. But Mike
very.
Young's a good coach, and they've got good players. I mean, Justin Mutz was on fire tonight with some of the
The
plays that
dunk,
were going back and forth.
the dunk. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just the dunk too. There were blocks in this game that
Oh,
also got me to look. There's two things that I will, especially in a pandemic season. There's two things that kind of make me in my head go, "That was a good game." The first one is I put myself in the mindset of what would this game have been like if there was a full crowd,
oh.
and
It
the
felt like
late
a real game even without it.
Right. That's my thing. Even through TV, it felt like an actual real physical dogfight, right? And I thought to myself, man, look, you know how Greensboro Coliseum can get for the 9 o'clock game. The Tar Heels are playing, and there's a good chunk of Hokie fans too.
Oh yeah.
That building would have been ridiculous. The other thing that kind of gets me to go, oh, okay, no, I enjoyed this game is when there's dunks, or in this case tonight for me was mainly the blocks. Me like not like jumping out of my seat, but like physically vocally going, ooh, oh, oh. Like
And
those things happened a lot tonight. It was a lot of fun.
I may have had a light swear on press row when Mutt had that dunk on Sharp, partially because of just the suddenness of it. Like I knew he was going to score on him, and I knew Dayron wasn't going to contest that hard because he had 3 fouls. But I didn't
Mhm.
expect him to do that. Just a light swear, a light obscenity, nothing too bad.
So the other thing that I took away from this game too, as it relates to the Tar Heels, mistakes that did happen in this game were quickly resolved, right? Like Walker Kessler had some moments that he'd like to have back, especially coming after the monster game he had Notre Dame. But there was a sequence there in the second half when things were still relatively tight between the Hokies and the Tar Heels, where defensively he had some rebounds, and also I think there was a second chance shot there that he ended up putting back. Armando Bacot overcame some first half woes, even maybe some defensive miscues to have a monster second half. Daron Sharp overcame some foul trouble too, and I think again it's little bits of adversity for the bigs were met with answers, and the same goes with the guard play tonight too, especially R.J. Davis who hit big shots when they needed it.
Yeah, I was a little surprised we didn't get a tough little nut that I heard from Roy. RJ was. And RJ was doing everything out there. He was playing tough defense. He was scoring baskets when UNC absolutely had to have them. And,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned the Kessler thing. Kessler's talked about being hard on himself. You could literally see it all over his face. I mean, he's hanging his head. He looks down.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, when he gets the and one opportunity, RJ comes over to him and just puts a hand on his chest because he can see how bad his body, how he looks bad. And he's like, hey, man, you can see him encouraging him, talking to him. Like, he grew up in a hurry tonight in this game. And I think also with Armando, and he touched on this in post game, it's kind of funny. I think Armando became sort of a troll in this game with Aluma in the back and forth.
A little bit, yeah.
And I think he learned from his troll, Roy Williams. So it was it was an entertaining battle of dudes who just wanted to seemingly troll the other person with Aluma and Baycott. But yeah.
Now, speaking of Carolina's bigs, who really were the main reason why they won this game, I get that RJ Davis made some great plays tonight, but this doesn't happen without the rebounding and the advantage they had down low. So I want to throw this out to you from our friend Tate Frazier from the Titus and Tate podcast, which you can catch on Fox. And he wants to introduce this idea called the Garrison Brooks theory because he's convinced that Carolina just plays better when Brooks is either injured or missing extended stretches because of foul trouble and things like that. Now, Garrison Brooks, I think we understand that when Baycott and Sharp are on, Carolina is really, really hard to beat. But Roy Williams talked about this after the game. The reason why he didn't play against Notre Dame was because of the ankle. He was healthy. He starts tonight. He plays tonight. And Roy said, look, he's earned that right to play. Again, where Roy's coming, yeah, he's not wrong. And we also, if you follow Roy enough, you kind of know that he's going to be loyal to dudes who have put in the work, and Garrison Brooks is one of those guys. But I think a lot of Carolina fans, and I don't disagree with this idea, we also know that the team's just better when Sharp and Baycott are on, not necessarily Garrison Brooks.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me because I just don't. I mean, he's played plenty of minutes in games that they've won, games that they've lost. Like, I don't know. I get where this is coming from, and I understand. But look, I hadn't really thought about it like that necessarily. Maybe I should dig into the numbers. Although, honestly, the thought of doing that is kind of depressing because Garrison's a nice kid, and
he's a nice guy.
He's spent a really terrible season last year, and I don't like the idea of trying to prove that he shouldn't be playing. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case either. Like, this is tough. The other thing too is like, let's keep in mind though that neither. Especially Sharp doesn't shoot free throws well, so you can't have him in late.
Okay.
Harrison's had his struggles, but he shoots better than Sharp. Sharp is like 50% from the foul line. I mean, there are certain things that you want to have a guy in there down the stretch that knows exactly what you want him to do, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. And there's always going to be guys like that in every program. Garrison Brooks happens to be that guy. Just something I thought I'd throw out there. I thought something that Tate put on Twitter that I'm sure you weren't ready for it. You weren't. I guess you didn't see that tweet earlier during the game.
No, but I was very like that was a game that, like you said, it was a really good game. So I was literally just kind of most of the game. I was tweeting here and there, but I was really trying to soak it in because it was a really fun watch.
Oh, I was kind of in the same boat too. I was just kind of hanging back. Although shout out to Kelly who came through with a home version of ACC hospitality, having made buffalo chicken tenders and Miller Lite. And a veggie tray. The chicken tenders are really, really good and they were fresh. It was the one thing that was missing from ACC hospitality. The chicken tenders have been sitting there for a really long time and they're a bit soggy. But you know what? I'll take the fresh tenders. But I found myself kind of just taking in the game more than anything else. And you're right, not necessarily trying to find tweets or whatever, because it really was a good back and forth. Now, the curiosity that I have going forward, you could see how much this game was a physical toll for the Tar Heels. So what's it going to be like tomorrow? Their third game in 3 days, coming up against a Florida State team that enjoyed a triple bye into the quarterfinals.
Oh man, what a weird thing. It's funny because Roy got asked like, "Is this the first time you've?" And he's like, usually I say no, it's not the first time, but this year I've said yes a lot, and that's
Yeah.
that's accurate. Yeah, I mean it's through no fault of FSU's either.
No, I mean, what are they going to do? It's
No,
Duke.
like they're
Also,
pretty good.
it's no fault to Duke either as
No,
well. It
no,
just so happens
yeah,
that Duke ends up being the team in the ACC tournament
yeah,
that does not complete has to exit because of a COVID. But it could have been any team. I think the
yeah,
reason why it was it was the story that it was the way it was the story today was because it's Duke, right?
yeah,
I
and
mean, this is
they've been playing well.
if this is not, I'm not trying to knock Georgia Tech, I'm not trying to knock Miami, but if those were the teams that ended up having a COVID issue that took them out of the ACC tournament and effectively ended their seasons, then I don't think it gets to the elevated story level that as it was with Duke today. Plus, there was this odd, I get that it's Duke and it's a national story, so therefore you kind of have to find the legs with it. But I don't understand why people were acting as though 2 wins from Duke somehow put them in the bubble conversation. They needed to get to Saturday
Yeah, I
or
don't.
even win it. So I don't understand why, like, oh, it cut short, the possibility of the NCAA tournament. No, they weren't going to make it without the auto bid. So what are we really doing here?
Well, I mean, I thought that too, based on what I had seen, but I also saw that after last night, some people had them in their first four out again. So,
I guess that's Duke getting the benefit of the doubt in that situation.
which I mean, that's also fair to point out that maybe that would happen, and I don't know. But I actually think, whereas with a team like North Carolina that you could have made a very good case for even before the ACC tournament, I think you were going to have a tougher time selling what Duke has done to
Yeah.
people because more people were going to point and be like, no, that's not fair if they somehow got in. But yeah, I mean, I yeah, and it's interesting with speaking of the bracketologists too. Like, I do wonder. North Carolina probably should try not to mess around and get like an 8 or 9 seed. I'm just saying. Like they need
Yeah,
a 7 or a 10.
I'm with what you're saying, and they
Yeah.
got a difficult task. They're in the semis against the Florida State team that has enjoyed the triple bye. But we'll talk about that tomorrow night at the ACC tournament. You're gonna stick around for another game, right?
I mean, yeah, I said I'm here until one of the triangle teams loses, and we've never
All
had a
right,
semifinals without a North Carolina team.
all right.
Sorry,
Well,
out of skaters.
all right. Well, we'll check in tomorrow night. Little ACC panic room after dark. See you then.